Many students are diagnosed with ADHD before they're diagnosed with Tourette. That's the thing that comes out first. It's probably, I hate to give percentages, but it's probably 40 or 50% of the kids who have Tourette syndrome also have ADHD. You know that ADHD is a difficult condition for kids in schools. Now picture that kid who's barking or chirping or has movements. So now you've got a kid who's got significant, not only he's got this ADHD, now he's also got the tics on top of it. Now you have a child who's really got a problem in school. So these are all the things that we know about ADHD, especially that executive function issue. So this is what we see. These are often things that we see in schools. The impulsivity, classic. The blurting out. Blurting out happens for kids. Now you throw Tourette on top of it, they're blurting out a lot, or they're barking, or they're chirping, or they're doing something else. Possibly coprolalia, that's on top of all of that. Of all of them, these last ones are probably the most important. The inability to sit still for a long period of time, which is why they have to have the ability to get up and move around. The difficulty with that unstructured time or the change in schedule, and this, the frustration from being overwhelmed. Kids tend to get overwhelmed. When you put TS on top of it, the frustration is huge. So they have all kinds of difficulties in the classroom. Just keeping track of their belongings, as I mentioned, the black hole of the locker, failing to complete tasks, managing their workload, we have to manage that for them. Developing concrete strategies, performing to their potential because all of these things are going on for them. They can't, you give them a long assignment. If I tell a student, I was working as an LD specialist, a student would walk into me and say to me, I have an assignment that's due in 2 weeks. We might as well have told that student that the assignment was due in the last week of school because it felt exactly the same way. Regular ed teachers sometimes had a hard time understanding that concept. Special ed teachers and people working with these kids, it was our job to then break that down and get back to the regular ed teachers to help them with that. Dealing with the unexpected. The most important thing that you can go back and tell your regular ed colleagues is, please let any substitute know that you've got a child with Tourette or ADHD or any of those things in your subfolder. That's the most important thing you can do. Okay. So now we've seen extended time on tests and quizzes for kids with tics, for kids with OCD, and also for kids with ADHD. They absolutely need this. It's the only way that they're going to survive because their brains are functioning in a different way than ours are, those of us who don't have ADHD. The use of graphic organizers to structure them. Graphic organizers are such an interesting thing for me because I've seen the circles and the squares, and all those different kinds of graphic organizers. Hand one to me, I'm sunk. I need an outline. Just a straight outline. Sometimes we forget kids are linear thinkers. I am a linear thinker. I gotta go this way. You give me circles and whatever, and I'm finished. I have no idea what we're doing. Giving them a word bank, it's not cheating. It's just helping them with their memory. Very often kids with ADHD, as you know, have short-term memory issues. They need some support. These are some of my favorites. So how do we keep track of their assignments? I knew one teacher who would take the child's agenda book or assignment book and hook it onto their backpack with a chain so they couldn't lose the agenda book. That's assuming he wrote the assignment down in the agenda book. So many kids we know now have cell phones. Many too many, in my opinion, but that's another entire lecture. So get permission from your principal to have the student call home or open his cell phone and write his assignment or call his assignment home. Do it that way. Or keep a separate folder for homework. But having them call home or email home their homework assignment, really, and we have to catch up with the new world, folks. Have them email home their homework assignment. Homework for all kids with Tourette's needs to be done on a quality versus quantity basis. You need to decide, Are you looking for them to learn the material, or are you looking for them to be exhausted? The issue with this is that kids with Tourette are very, very tired at the end of the day, and we'll talk about that when we talk about medication. But also with ADHD and all these different pieces, they've had a rough day. So if the child has Tourette's, all these kids have Tourette's, and they maybe have OCD and ADHD. Not uncommon they have all of these. So you have a child who may be trying to suppress his tics, or he's ticking a lot. He's managing his OCD symptoms. He's keeping his hands in his pocket so he's not touching that fire alarm. And he has the typical symptoms of ADHD. He spent 6 hours in school. He survived lunch, maybe recess, the bus ride home. Now he gets home, his tics explode, and we're expecting him to sit down and do homework. So if you're assigning math problems, and he's got to do 20 math problems, does he really need to do 20 math problems, or can you see from 5 that he knows the material? We want him to have some responsibility, or her, to have the responsibility, but we don't want this child to be so overwhelmed that the next thing he's doing is becoming so anxious that he's saying to mom or dad, I can't go to school tomorrow, I haven't done my homework. That's the last thing we want. So don't have him copy the spelling words 5 times, 2 times. Whatever you can do to make it so that it's manageable for the student. You have to keep in mind, these kids are exhausted at the end of the day. And when we talk about medication, you'll find out even how much more exhausted they are. So when they go to their lockers, because you've given them a few extra minutes to get to that locker, one of the best things you can do is suggest to mom and dad, or do it yourself, is color code. So I know I have math homework. So my math is red. So I pick up my red folder, my red book, and my red notebook, and I've got math. Oh, I also have science homework. Science is blue, so my science notebook is blue, my science folder is blue, my science textbook is covered in blue. Color code things, so that just makes it easier for kids to see them. One of my favorites, and I was an administrator, and I have to admit I had to do this, and you have to push your administrators a little bit on this, and you put it into a 504 or an IEP, which Kathy will be talking about this afternoon. Provide a second set of textbooks at home. So again, what do we want the child to learn? He needs to learn responsibility. Really. He's 9 years old, and he has tics, and he has OCD, and he has ADHD. You think he's not trying to learn enough? Give him a second set of books at home. If it's written into the 504, by the way, or the IEP, the district has to buy the books. Because taking the books home should not be what dictates whether or not this child can actually do the homework. Dividing the homework, as we talked about, dividing long-term assignments into segments with separate due dates and separate grading. It's not enough to just divide it into segments. Taking that 2-week assignment, that 2-week assignment needs to be divided into 2 to 3 day segments at the most, so that child knows what he needs to do in 2 to 3 days. If you go beyond that, it's June. He can't see it. He or she can't see it. Divide it up and have it due on that day with grades. It'll work much better. You need to always take a step back and say, what do I really need the child to learn? You want him to get the material. Responsibility will come, I promise. Responsibility will come. My son became a responsible human being. Not quite sure when that happened, but it did. He actually graduated college. I was not there. As he went through college, I was the other end of the phone. He did graduate college. I didn't do any of his papers for him. I didn't help him with any of his papers. He got them all done by himself. I've helped other college students who did not have disabilities. They send me their papers. I correct them and send them back to them by email. Didn't do that with my sons. What happens in a school where the teachers are required to teach bell to bell? Literally, the kids walk in the door, the class starts, and the class ends at the bell. My suggestion would be that written into that child's 504 plan or IEP is that the child stops work 3 to 4 minutes before the end of that bell, so that he has the opportunity to write down the assignment, call it in, whatever he can't work. Kids with Tourette, OCD, ADHD, they can't work bell to bell, or they will not get this. They will not be able to do it. And if that needs to be written into the IEP, that needs to be written into the IEP. And you need to educate the staff on this. And that's a critical piece. Unlimited time, extended time. Sometimes in an IEP it says unlimited time. The problem with unlimited time on assignments, you say to a student you have unlimited time on an assignment. You can finish this anytime. What happens to that student is you're all shaking your head. What happens is they don't finish that assignment, they get another one. They don't finish that one, there's another one. I'm not a great fan of unlimited time on assignments.
Yeah, I was talking about tests. I think you were talking about
Tests, there should be extended time to the point that whatever they need to finish the test. However, same issue. If it turns out that it's taking 5 days in the resource room or whatever your learning center to finish that test, think of all the things he's not getting done. So I say unlimited time with the caveat of you've got to be careful that everything else isn't piling up. Some states, I use this PowerPoint in other states, we'll talk about it when we get to the standardized statewide tests. My state has unlimited time on our statewide tests as opposed to what you have, but we'll get to that. Yeah, unlimited time as long as you finish by the end of the day. This is really interesting. Some of these ideas are not mine. I do not take credit for some of these. During the day, some squeezing a ball. My favorite is tap a pencil on a sponge. Kids sit and they tap all day. Put it on not my idea, put it on a sponge. Put a sponge on his desk. So he can tap all he wants and you're not going to hear it, which I thought was just a great idea. Kids with neurobiological conditions, whichever one it is, even if it's ADHD without Tourette, with Tourette, they need to know what's happening. The best thing you can do is post a schedule in the front of the room so they know what's happening in your class for the day. They need to know if there's going to be a change in the day. It's picture day. Oh, we're shortening the schedule every period by 15 minutes. Oh, we're going to an assembly at such and such a time. Don't spring anything on kids with neurobiological conditions. You will reap that reward. You need to tell them when things are going to change. A student with ADHD, certainly don't have them sit near the windows, because if they're mowing the lawn, which they probably do more in Florida than they do in Massachusetts, he'll know that they're mowing the lawn, but they won't hear a thing that you're saying because they'll be focused on the lawn mowing. Lockers and backpacks, the great black hole of the world. How many of you have gone with a kid to clean out a locker? Yeah, or cleaned out a backpack. It's amazing what's in there. Hopefully they're not critters, but occasionally you're never quite sure what's going to be in there. You should be helping this child to clean out his locker about once a week or his backpack once a week. I had a student, and this is interesting, I had a student once, fabulous, fabulous kid. I had a very tiny classroom, as special educators sometimes do, and he carried a bag that was big enough to hold a body. He had everything in it. And he was a big kid, he was a football player. Big kid carrying this bag around. I tripped over it on a daily basis. And I finally said to him, okay, this is it. You've got to use your locker. So I pulled him outside and I said to him, what's with the locker? He didn't know how to use the lock. So I took him and I went to his locker and we worked on that lock until he got the lock. And finally, I didn't have to worry about that. I did have to worry about the fact that his locker became a black hole and we did have to clean it out, but at least I wasn't tripping over what was essentially his locker. If a student's not using their locker and everything is in the backpack or they're carrying a huge bag, find out why. Sometimes it's because the person next to him is bullying him, or it's because they don't have enough time, which is why you allow them to leave a couple of minutes early to get there, or it's because they can't use the lock. Have a student repeat directions back to you. Oh, extraneous clutter. How many of you are elementary teachers? You have gorgeous classrooms, sometimes too gorgeous. You need to be very thoughtful about how much stuff is hanging in your rooms. And this is more than just elementary teachers. I had a friend who's a high school teacher. She's in her 47th year. She wants to go to 50 years. God bless her. I finished at 35. Her classroom is so busy. I walked in there one day and I said, actually, I walked in one day and I went back to my principal because I was an assistant principal. I walked back to my principal and how do you tell a teacher who's been teaching 40 odd years she has to clean her room? I went back to my principal and I said, you go tell her she's got to clean that room, because I was concerned that it was so overstimulating that kids were losing focus. Be careful about clutter. Again, let kids go out a little bit early, and communication is the key. Talking to the child, finding out that he wasn't using his locker because he couldn't use the lock.